where I'd like to start.
Well, of course, mother is the necessity of invention. And so we had been in a meeting with one of our 501cs, and they were trying to raise money and are still trying to raise money. And it was just became obvious that we just keep asking the same people for more money. And so we were trying to brainstorm, how could we get new players? How could we get new people involved in this? So what we were able to do is through the NIL, we thought, let's form our own organization, and then let's reach out to one of the athletes and see if they'd be willing to help us participate. And so that's a totally different story about how we picked an organization and how we picked an athlete. But what was amazing is that whenever we put the two of them together, they were a natural fit. Mm-hmm. So that's what we love about JD Note, and that's what we love about the Samaritan Community Center, is that once we put the two of them together, it was just amazing to see it blossomed as it's now starting to blossom. We work with a lot of community organizations, and I love to go to the meetings. I love to hear what's going on. I love to hear about what their needs are, but it's sometimes you just kind of run out of ideas. I mean, the numbers that it takes now to build new facilities, and the numbers are just getting so big that sometimes you just get intimidated and say, how are we going to ever raise that much money? And so they were looking for a new way to do it. We were looking for a new way to do it. And at the same time, because of our relationships with the University of Arkansas and the athletic department and this whole NIL, and at the time that we were putting this together, NIL had a negative connotation associated with it. Nobody was really excited about it. Everybody was upset about it, thought this is going to be the end of college athletes. And it was kind of like, well, there's got to be some bright spot in this. There's got to be some way that we can take this and have it benefit the community. And it truly was just driving down I-49 one day. It was a situation of, something, if we could pair these two together, it might work. And so then it was like, okay, who's the athlete? Because I don't know the athlete. That's
where I come in.
Yeah, that's not how I function. I'm not the I can find the need, but now it's more Mandy's role to say, this is the person we need to work with.
And if you know me or if you've seen me at the games,
or hear her at the games. I just sat next to her. Yeah. I actually got 2 seats down. I was lucky last night.
You got a break last night.
There was somebody new that didn't know the situation that sat next to her, and then I wouldn't switch seats. I was like, no, you sat down there, it's your seat. It's bad luck.
I just have a love for, I have a love for kids in general, and then a love for the student athletes. And, there's a story behind that jersey, or, what they're out there doing, the baseball, the basketball, the football, the track, soccer. I don't want to leave anybody out, but all that. There's a story. That is an individual, and there is a story. And so I love to get to know the players and what their story is. Where did they come from? Why are they here? And so when I have that opportunity, and I basically make that opportunity happen for myself, but I do at the games, or on the court, on the field, or if I see them in public, I'm not afraid just to stop them and talk to them. I just have this passion, and I just want to bring the right athlete into our home and into our NIL that we have started. And so when Bryan had his idea of, I'm going to go with the Samaritan House, who do you think we should? And I had been just praying about JD, and he had just really been on my heart. I was like, I've got the athlete, and it's JD. And I mean, he was like, JD, okay, why JD? And then I told him,
Yeah, and it was and it was really kind of confusing to all of us because we had an idea, we had a thought, but we didn't have a way to execute the plan. And so through a mutual friend who was also JD's attorney, we reached out to him and said, hey, here's what we want to try to do. And he was just as confused as we were. It was like, okay, so yeah, I understand it, but how does it work? And we're like, we don't know. You help us put it together. So he our friend Brandon, he brought JD over, and we had a wonderful dinner, and you figure out real quick this is going to work. And so then we sprung it on him, and JD was just immediately, oh yeah, I'd love to be a part of that.
I think so. I think there's always going to be a connection. I believe, whether it's like the Samaritan House, JD's background. I mean, he did not know if he was going to have food on the table at night. Raised by a single mom.
It was a tough time for the family.
Tough time,
and the mom did an incredible job. I mean, we love her, and she's good to hang out with. We love her.
But I just feel like that's why it's just very important that I pray about it and I follow like my heart. If I'm the one choosing the athlete, or God's giving me that athlete, I just feel that there's going to be a fit.
And you also got to remember, at the University of Arkansas, we've got great leadership, we've got great coaches, and they get the right athletes. I mean, they're very strict about what they're looking for in their programs, and that's one thing I'll say about all the coaches. I mean, you don't hear very many bad things about the athletes at the University of Arkansas. Well, you got to remember, these athletes do not have any time whatsoever. I mean, we communicate with the athletes, and I mean, they're busy. I mean, we would love to have JD have been here today, but guess what? At 11 o'clock, he was in the weight room, and he's going to be in the weight room till 2:30, and then he's going to be at practice, and then after practice, he's going to grab something to eat, and then he's going to get his rest. And that's the day after a big game. That you can imagine what it's like 2 and 3 days before a game. So I think where people are confused about is that these athletes have any time to spend outside their college academics and their athletics. So what you always have to do is say, okay, what works for the athlete? When do they have time? And so what will happen next is, because we felt like it was important to get through this announcement phase of it so that people would understand what it is and what it is not. Now we put JD and the Debbie Rambo, in this case, at the Samaritan Community Center. We're going to put the two of them together, and she's going to, with JD's help, raise money for this next development that they're getting ready to do. So, it's more or less JD's committed his time and energy to this community service, and now the community service is going to step in and say, okay, here's what we're going to be doing going forward. It does have an end time because these athletes will go on and do other things, whether it be the business world or professional in their career. But it's important that all of these agreements and all these contracts have an ending period to them. And so that's one thing we stress to everybody that we work with, and our blueprint is that it does have an end to it. Of course, we would love for JD to stay a part of the organization. I know the Samaritans would always love to have him there. It was amazing to see JD go in the Samaritan Center and work in the center and then go to the store. That was really lifting to us.
packing up for, you could just tell, I mean, when he was packing up the snack packs for the kids, they just got so creative too, but somebody would hold the bags, and he was like, using the food and like shooting it like a basketball, filling it all up. But just just standing there watching him and just the smile on his face, the impact that it was making on him was,
they had
I just can't even describe it.
they had a volunteer group, and usually they have volunteers pack the snacks, and I think this was one of the women's leagues was there that day, and they were just they wanted to have their picture taken with him, and it was just so exciting. We just dropped in. We called Debbie and said, okay, look, now's a good time. Can we come up there? Because JD just happened to have a break in the schedule. We all jumped in the car. We went up there. The volunteers were overwhelmed. The kitchen staff was overwhelmed, and it was just a blessing for us all to get to do that. And that was just for the so that we would have some website information and be able to, but. People, don't get me wrong, there are people that do know what's going on in Northwest Arkansas, but a lot of people aren't in touch with that side of Northwest Arkansas. And the Samaritan Community Center, they feed thousands of kids every day, and nobody thinks about it or knows anything about it. Yeah, and then plus at the same time, the athletes, I was a college student at the University of Arkansas. The athletes, like so many of us, don't know that these organizations even exist. Whenever we sat down with JD, and it was like, okay, so here's the organization we'd like for you to work with, and he'd never heard of them. They're up in Rogers. They have a store in Springdale and a store in Rogers, and they have an office in Rogers. But he didn't know what they did, and so you explain it to him that, they feed children and they provide medical services and counseling, and they help people get back on their feet, and they resell goods. And he's like, well, yeah, I'd want to be a part of that. That's the response that we get from most people is they're not aware. They're not aware of it. So if we can bring awareness and we can help support them, that's what this is all about.
And if we can, like I think you mentioned, use social media as a platform, also like JD's social media, to help the Samaritans, raise their money that they're needing, the $14 million.
Yeah, it's $14 million objective.
Their new building. That's what it's going to take. It's going to take JD, and it's going to take the Samaritans' social media to get that out there to the community.
And that's some of the hardest things for us to talk about, because I said this is all new for us too. The reason we wanted to tell our story was so that the story be told right. JD is not making a significant amount of money for this. It's not a life-changing dollar amount for JD, and certainly nothing for what he's capable and potentially doing. It's also not an exclusive agreement, because while we might have exclusive agreements with athletes in the future, this one we didn't feel like we needed to. He's a smart young man. He's doing very well, and we don't feel like that we need to, tie him up in a situation that would prevent him from making other money. I think it's important that the athletes get compensated, and most of the deals that we've seen or talked about with the athletes they're not getting compensated enough for what they're doing, but it's in the early stages. I think that'll change over time. But in this situation, we felt like the JD should have been compensated for the work that he was doing, so we are compensating him. And I do know that the Samaritans are very grateful for anything that he can do to help them raise this money. But the money's going to always be hard to talk about. That's even true in the business world. You don't generally openly talk about what you're paying your people. Well, what we're hoping is other people will use this as a blueprint to do what needs to be done in their community. I mean, every community is different and has different needs. We know what our community involvement is, but no, we'd be open to talking to other organizations, or we're always willing to talk to other athletes, because even if we don't sign them into the NIL, in our NIL AAC, we're still willing to, and hopefully could give them some good advice. In a very short time, we've seen some bad deals put together, and so we very quickly say, no, here's the agreement you need. And if this agreement is, if nobody's willing to sign this agreement, then you probably don't have a good partnership, and you need to think about something else. You know. And then there's also, I mean, they need accounting, they need tax work, there's a lot to go with. You know, what these athletes don't always understand is that this is income that has to be reported, needs to be reported, and there's work to go on behind the scenes. Well, the first service we provided was the other night during a dinner. I looked at all of them and says, now, did everybody pay in their quarterly taxes today? And didn't get very many responses of yes. I said, that's okay. It's your first year as a tax earner. You actually have until the first quarter of 2022, and I'll keep that date in mind too. So it's obvious that while they are enjoying the aspects of making their own income, they've got to learn the responsibilities. And keep in mind, the University of Arkansas has done everything they can to help them. They just weren't thinking about that at that time. So what we do is we have accounting people that can help them. We're there for them beyond just this. And we're glad JB Hunt's getting credit. Don't get me wrong. We're glad they're getting credit, and we love all of the Photoshop images of JD and JB Hunt. And let me assure you something, if my dad was still alive, he'd be standing right next to him in the photograph. So don't get me wrong. We love the publicity that JB Hunt Transport is getting, but this is a private endeavor between my wife and I, Mandy. So it's not a JB Hunt Transport endeavor.
You're looking at AAC.
Yeah,
right
this
here.
is it. Yeah.
Bryan and Mandy.
And a lot of people helping us. A lot of people getting us guidance and help as well. But no, we do love the JB Hunt Transport loves the publicity, especially the good ones. Yeah. You know, as I say, we're taking this in steps and strides. You know, right now we have a real focus, and that's for the Samaritan Community Center, and for what they're doing and what they have done to be out there. JD's passionate about it. We're passionate about it. There's other organizations that we work with. There's more to come. There's more on the way. But you know, our focus is to helping both aspects. Us as a family, we want the athletes to do well while they're here at the University of Arkansas, and we want the community programs to do well, because then we both benefit. We all benefit if those two come together and work well. But you know, it's not really a well drawn out plan, other than that, you know, we have a good cause in our heart, and we think this will be successful. Of course, yes, yes. There's some exciting ones. Yeah, there's some exciting ones. We're trying to get the first one to work, you know. Yeah.
We have some, yeah, there's some in the works, and hopefully in the spring.
Yeah,
In
I
the
think in the
spring,
spring we'll have a
be
couple
able
more
to have-
announcements. Well, we're very fortunate that we have a University of Arkansas that this would work in. I mean, whenever you talk about the leadership there and the coaching staff, the administrative staff, even the campus itself. I mean, we luckily have that organization that this fits in with perfectly. It's just we're just hoping that we can bridge the community service aspect of it with the University of Arkansas.
And
So
there are rules. Yeah, there are
Yeah.
rules. Trust me, there are rules, and we have, I mean, made sure and, you know, sent everything in to the university because we want to follow the rules, and because the last thing that we want to do, again, being so new at this and it just being something that Bryan and I are doing, is, I mean, put the athlete themselves at risk. You know, because it is so new, and I mean, we don't want to do anything to ruin what they've worked so hard for. But yeah, there's a few rules that we've had to follow.